your Facebook page, I think, is ripe to, utilize or promote some of this stuff. You've got a massive following on there. And I think, long before you and I even talked about doing a podcast, I think we were texting each other back and forth about how crazy some of that stuff that you post on there. I mean, it just goes absolutely apeshit bananas. I mean, it's not unusual for you to have something that's shared, 2,700 times in a single day.
Yeah. No, I still do, even with all the shadow banning and everything. I did the last 28 days. I reached 1.5 million people, 765,000 engagements, and that was a bad month for me. The month before, I was at like 3 million. No, my numbers are still like insane. Most people would kill for these. The issue is my Facebook audience is a little boomer, and so there's a disconnect. This is why I insult the boomers and can say I hate Christians, even though I don't, because the boomers get mad, but the boomers don't buy anything, right?
Right.
Guys are like, oh, how dare he make a joke about Christians? I'm so offended.
Yeah.
And the younger guys are the ones who are going to buy this stuff anyway. So I have like a huge audience on Facebook, which makes me look relevant or whatever. But for maximum conversion, it'll still be the younger guys.
And that's kind of interesting. Is what is your thought on? You've got three major platforms. You've got Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. What's your thought on Instagram right now? Because it seems like you're a 800-pound gorilla on Twitter.
Right.
Okay, I mean you're like a juggernaut on Twitter, and you have a massive Facebook following. Instagram, not as much. And I know, like maybe a year ago or so, maybe a year and a half ago, you actually rolled out your Instagram saying it's not going to have any political stuff, and then you kind of changed your stance on that, and you're doing a little bit of everything.
Well, yeah, but there's not really any political stuff on my Instagram. There's quasi, only in terms of like cultural kind of stuff. So if I tweet out, for example, if you're born in America, you're not self-made. I mean, some people read that as being an Obama thing, but it was actually in response to people saying Kylie Jenner was a trust fund kid. And,
right.
Well, sure, but if you're born in America, to some degree, everybody's a trust fund kid. But then people immediately drew attention to Obama. You didn't build that. It's like, no. Like you're missing the point. It's a point about abundance. It wasn't a political thing.
Well, when you say abundance, are you talking about having access to like clean water and healthcare and decent schools and roads to drive on and those types of things?
Yeah, functioning legal system. Just the idea that as flawed as it is, people being framed is actually not that common versus other countries. If a powerful judge doesn't like you in America, sure, they can screw with you, but not to the degree that other people can. So it was more along the lines of quit complaining about what everybody else has that you weren't born with, and focus on what opportunities you have. You have a working internet connection. You can start a YouTube. You can do this. You can do that. And so even though some people interpret it as a political, it's more of a mindset thing.
Right. So are you saying that, like Kylie Jenner, I mean, there's no argument that woman really created something magnificent out of the gift she was given, right?
Yeah, but that money, like we talked about this in another podcast, which is she had enough capital to absorb losses, and as long as you're not a complete moron, you're gonna hit a big 10x or 20x deal.
One of those 5 that we talked about in another podcast, right?
So, but people aren't even thinking that way. That's the whole point. The haters don't even have that level of sophistication. If somebody said, well, she had all these she could absorb all these losses and she could take more business risk that other people couldn't. Most people, you get kind of one shot. you're a little bit younger, you really go all in. If it fails, you go bankrupt and rebuild, and then you kind of take a more conservative approach. So most people get one catastrophic failure. You're Kylie Jenner, you get 3, 4, 5, and you're just gonna hit. You're gonna hit on one of them, no question about it. So there is actually, that's a fair point, but people aren't even saying that. People are just saying, oh, she was born into money, therefore she turned 10. Yeah, but turning 10 million into 100 million, that's not easy. I don't care if you have 10 million. Turning 10 million to 100 isn't just something you're going to do without any kind of acumen. But you can absorb.
Well, and I'll tell you, most people I know that were born with, you know, significant money haven't been able to turn that into something magnificent, something special. Most of them do nothing with it or end up, you know, unfortunately on drugs or, you know, wasting it away. And yeah, and I've seen that over and over again in my life. It's actually a rare oddity when you find somebody who, let's say, inherits $2 million and they're able to turn that into 25 or 30 or $40 million. That's pretty rare.
Yeah, and another way too that I frame that it isn't political per se, but the idea that if you're a guy who's 22, 23, that there's almost no chance you have to worry about being murdered when you're walking out. You don't have to worry about a bomb. Just things that we take for granted.
Sure.
That it's like, okay, you want to, you know, you're a young guy, you're broke, you're crying because you're not Kylie Jenner, you didn't hit your money or whatever. Well, sure, but you can just learn whatever you want to learn on the internet. And you can take chances here or there. You can make smaller gambles. You have, you know, more or less physical security outside of very rare cases. You have these opportunities. Why not focus on, yeah, look, I do have all this abundance in my life. And because that's how I always looked at it. I mean, I grew up poor, had no real opportunities. And then you become older and you become your own person. So if you're a child listening to our podcast, first of all, don't if you're under 18, but you're kind of screwed if you're a 13-year-old, unless you're really enterprising or something. And I guess
right.
Change that, but you know, you grew up poor, I grew up poor. It isn't like I was 13 and I could change my station of life, and it was a
yeah. I mean, I would say I grew up in Missouri. My parents had some money. Were they extremely wealthy? No, but you know, I feel like I had some opportunity in that regard. You know, from, you know, being able to get like a small loan from my father or something. But it really is, what do you do with that? You know, how can you turn that into something else? And yeah, I see what you're saying regarding the Kylie Jenner thing. You know, there was a lot of banter on social media about that a few days ago. And you had a very interesting take on that. So I just wanted to delve into that a little bit. But jumping back to my original question was, what's your feeling on those big three social media platforms? So on those three, Mike, as far as if you just take these big three, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, what's your feeling on those three from an entrepreneur, whether it's a guy who owns, you know, a Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise to, you know, a guy that owns a small lawn care business is 22 years old? What's your feeling on those three platforms for an entrepreneur?
Oh, it'd be Twitter for sure. Just because it's an IQ environment. People on Twitter are smarter. People on Facebook are not as smart as people on Twitter. And Instagram, I just don't have as many people. So how many people who listen to me on Instagram are going to listen to the podcast? I don't know, a couple hundred maybe. I mean, my story's 2,000 views. So yeah, I would say probably 1,000 people would listen to from Instagram and listen to a podcast. Twitter, we'll see. Facebook, yeah, we'll see too. The blog's been picking up for sure too. That'll pick up. So
yeah. But you know, again, so let's say I'm a young guy. I've got a pickup truck, and I've got, you know, a guy that helps me out, and I've got 3, you know, ride behind lawnmowers, and I'm wanting to try to build up that brand a little bit. Would I go to Facebook, you think, and video that stuff? Would I go to Twitter and do posts about that, or is Instagram the way to do it?
Oh, if you were an entrepreneur doing
yes.
Oh, I would go door to door probably. I would probably still go door to door and I would do YouTube. I would do YouTube probably how to, repair a lawnmower. The other day I was trying to figure out how to program a garage door opener, and there were instructions that work. So I went on YouTube, and the video I watched had 50,000 views. The guy had a garage door company, so I imagine he acquired a few customers. Yeah, I wrote about this in Guerrilla Mindset. I'm still a believer in old school SEO, which is how to program, and it was a very specific garage door opener. And I went on YouTube, typed it in, watched it, and he had a little trail, bumper for his company or whatever. And I imagine, he took some here and there. And
yeah. Well, it's amazing when I talk to my kids. I mean, my daughter Beverly will sit down and, she'll want to go through and, figure out how to do some kind of like, short edit program for something she wants to post on her Snapchat story. And she goes onto YouTube and she'll watch a 7-minute video and she's like a total pro at the thing. It's just amazing.
Yeah. The number one, and that's a little far afield if you have a pickup truck and three lawnmowers and mowing. I don't know that. I think those days are kind of gone, just in terms because there's too many people doing it necessarily. You word of mouth. That's good old fashioned referral, word of mouth. I don't think you're going to find it on the internet. But you're just knocking on doors, and you get a few clients, and you build word of mouth. If you do have a lawnmower thing though, and you have little problems here and there, then nothing beats. And in terms of if you want to be an entrepreneur, I tell this people at the beginning, anything on the internet, just learn how to write a how-to article, how to program garage door opener XYZ. Oh, you probably have this garage door opener. They're really hard to do. Here's how you do it. And just learn how to make a video on all of that kind of stuff. How to change the gas tank, or what if the carburetor's clogged? How to change your fuel filter in your lawnmower or something.
Right.
Even if it doesn't convert to new customers, you're still learning. And the biggest mistake people make, especially younger, is they think that because they don't know much that they don't know anything. And no, you just don't know much. But you're allowed to talk about what little you do know. And sure, maybe 15 people watch the video. That's not the point. The point is that you're learning how to make content. You're learning what people are looking for. And then you would even learn you could learn how to target ads through that way. So you would learn, okay, we just had a bunch of rain. Then maybe you could do like a Facebook targeted ad to people in your zip code. Need a lawnmower? Be there in 4 hours, and you just have an offer that converts. Because sales is the same. You have a problem. Okay, so where I grew up, you'd get a bunch of rain, and even if you mowed your grass 2 days ago, now your grass is up to your mid-calf. So if it just rained, go on Facebook, target everybody wherever you could do it within 4 hours, and say, I'll be there within 4 hours to have your lawn mowed, and you spend 25 in ads. Maybe it converts, maybe it doesn't, but you're learning the process. And I really am a big believer in just learning the process with small amounts of money, and do that over the years. And then as you get more money will scale up. So even with Facebook ads, people, $25. People shouldn't be spending more than $25 at a time on Facebook. Data set. Okay, I want all people aged X to Y. What gender? One gender or both genders? What interests? Well, people who like such and such. That's how you should be thinking. Just $25 a time. Now you're getting clicks. So like if we advertise this podcast, you would say, okay, you want to be politically correct and say men and women, but there's a demographic for entrepreneurial podcasts, and it needs to largely be men aged 22 to about 44. Now there's people outside of that range, but that's not the way it works. And then you would say, okay, men age 22 to 44. Well, what city? Well, the U.S. They've liked Grant Cardone, or they liked Gary Vee, or they liked, I don't know, On Ron. I hope not, but just tossing that as an example. Or they liked X, Y, and Z. But you just go $500. Did enough people click over? No. Okay, so one of two things is wrong. Either your demographic targeting was wrong, or or your ad was wrong. You don't know which. So then you run a new ad using the same interest groups, target groups, and then you see, okay, did it click over? Okay, maybe it's not the ad. Maybe I have the interest groups wrong. Maybe people who liked, I don't know, Zen meditation would be more in tune to that. And you keep doing that $25 at a time. You're not breaking the bank. And then you find out, oh, okay, here's the people who really like the stuff. And then you target them. So I'll give you an example of how funny this is. I was with one of my best friends from law school. We were hanging out. He pulls out a wallet. I'm like, oh, man, I have the same wallet. I pull out my wallet. We both bought it from Facebook. It was this leather, really slim wallet. So all of us, we all think we're special. We're really unique, but we're just demographics. Okay, you're a man. You need a wallet. Sometimes you wear a suit, so you don't want a big fat suit for your back wallet. You want it to fit slim in your front pocket. So they even targeted people who go to the gym want a slimmer wallet because you wear tighter jeans and you don't want it bulging. I imagine there was all kinds of calibration. Same thing with mushroom coffee. I started drinking mushroom coffee off a Facebook ad. I bought a backpack off a Facebook ad. So everybody can do that, and that's how you target it. And because there's no magic to this online stuff. That's why I feel bad for people who spend all these thousands of dollars on courses that purport to teach them it. And I'll watch the courses and I go, no. Like, you need traffic to your website. There's two ways to get traffic. You pay for traffic or you get it organically. Organically,
this $25 thing's really interesting because I do hear of a lot of people that I talk to in my real estate circles that will dump anywhere from $500 to $1,500 on an ad at any given time to try to source whether it's buyers or sellers or whatever they're looking for. And I like this $25 thing because it almost reminds me of like an orange, and you're sticking a straw into it. Am I getting juice here? No. Okay, $25. Stick it in here. Am I getting juice? No. You stick it in the next one. Boom, all of a sudden you get flow, right? And then you can say, okay, well, let's take 25 up to 400 or 500 or whatever, because that's where your sweet spot is. So I do like that pinprick methodology.
Well, and the seduction too of the Facebook ads is it'll say, if you do $1,000 buy, you'll reach, 100,000 people. So Facebook knows how to play in your psychology. Oh, for $25, you'll reach 1,400, but we'll upsell you on reaching a wider audience. But how do you know you're reaching the right audience? Right? So you want to reach more people. You want to reach, if I'm buying an ad, and this is, by the way, is why TV ads are still, they're mostly a scam, is I don't want everybody to know I exist. I only want people who would want to read my books, watch my movie, listen to our podcast. I only want them to know. Everybody else, I don't need to reach me. I don't need the ego of them watching me. So when you're doing ads, you just want to zero in on, I only want the people who subscribe to this podcast to even see an advertisement. So why just spend $1,000 and to reach a bunch of people and not know how you're converting? And then you can really go deep into interests, specific public figures that they've liked, specific areas.
Right.
Real estate, for example, and if you were doing like home flipping and you happen to know one market happened to be a little bit hotter, you might only target your ad to that group. And you might only target to, there's a lot of women real estate agents, so you might only want to target that to women because there are so many women real estate agents. And you would say, I only want women to see this ad. And
it is kind of amazing from a real estate perspective, we can target ads on Facebook. The minutia is stunning. So I can target homeowners in a certain zip code that have shown interest in bankruptcy attorneys, foreclosure specialists, loan modification programs, things like that. And you can target those homeowners specifically if you're looking, say, for distressed homeowners, people that you might potentially, as a flipper, get a deal from. So Facebook does let you do a drill down, really into the weeds on those ads. And then doing that with this pinprick $25 methodology that you talk about is brilliant.
Yeah, and then if they're good, do them 100 at a time. And then scale that 100, okay, now 150, 200. And that's why people, they blow their budget so much, is because if somebody comes in and says, I want to do your Facebook ads, like, so say I pitched you and I'm an ad agency. I don't want to waste my time doing $25 ads. But me, I like to, I like to learn the things as I know, because then if I ever hire somebody to do it, like so many times I'm like, no, I've done this before. Don't tell me a website takes 20 hours to do. Like, it just doesn't. I've done it. I could go set a website up. I could have a domain hosting and a website up in an hour and a half. So don't try to tell me it's $5,000 to build a website. It just isn't. And it's the same thing with ads. So if I'm pitching you, I would say, well, give me a $5,000 a month budget for it, and I probably would skim some on the top. That's how people do things. And then you want to cast a wide net, when the right approach is to say, we're going to experiment $25 ad sets. We'll go up to 100, show you the data, and then you want to talk to the person. So I would say, okay, we didn't get that many clicks. What do you think? Do we have a better picture? Do we have something else we could use? Something more dramatic? Or let's talk a little bit more. The beauty of your business and my business is I already have customers. So I don't need to imagine who might be interested in whatever it is that I'm doing. Like, I know who's in it. And it's going to be 80% men, 20% women. And of that age demo, they're going to fall into the 22 to 44 range. That's going to be 80% of them. And then the rest are on the tails. And by the way, if anybody's listening and you're outside that range, no one's saying you're not welcome to listen. You're welcome. I'm just telling you that's who in general is going to be interested. So if you're on Facebook, why would you just say, okay, I'm going to send this ad to everybody on Facebook? Well, not everybody is going to be interested. Maybe 10% of the population is interested. Or if it's truly a niche product, maybe 1% of 1% would be interested. And how do you only find the 1% of 1%? You keep experimenting, $25 at a time.
Right. And one thing I learned through this podcast process, specifically from you, which I thought was interesting, because it's not something that I would have thought of. But originally, when we were talking about running, putting this out like on some of the social media platforms, I was like, well, I'm just thinking conventional wisdom, right? I'm not a podcast guy. So I'm thinking, well, we want to drive everybody to iTunes, right? We would just want to say, hey, here's the link to iTunes, and that's it. And you were like, no, you don't want to do that. We want to get them back to a website that we control. And it's interesting you said that. And then like a week later, I'm reading a story online, and lo and behold, guess whose name's in it? It's Mike Cernovich's name, regarding a video, I guess, that somebody at a Project Veritas had done, that Facebook was actually de-boosting certain people on Facebook using this AI software program called Sigma. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we were just talking about this like a week prior about trying to get everybody to a website that we control, Mindset Squared, right? And then you have a link tree there that people can click off of. So I would love to get your take on, were you aware that was going on?
Yeah, so I've been, the Facebook thing was weird because they claimed that they flagged me as supporting suicide, which is like the dumbest thing. If they had flagged me for making a bad joke, I'd say, well, on Facebook, I was like G-rated, but who knows, maybe. But they just make stuff up. But that said, is I was always big, because I had a blog. I did very well on a blog during the golden age of blogging, which was before the golden age of podcasting. And if you have a podcast, you want people to go to your podcast, because if somebody goes to iTunes, Tim Cook is selling them stuff. I want to sell people stuff. I want to own that real estate. I want you seeing our advertisements. I want people seeing our stuff on there. So that's the number one reason you want to drive them to the site. Is, yeah, sure, there is that censorship component to it, and absolutely there is that too. But you want people on your site, and it's harder than ever to get people to go to your website. In the good old days of blogging, I would tweet a link to my blog and I would get 5 or 10,000 clicks. Now, if I get a couple thousand, that's a real, that's like a home run. It used to just be, taken for granted. And that's because most people on social media, whatever their preferred platform is, they don't leave that. They go on YouTube for 5 hours. Well, if you're on YouTube for 5 hours, you're looking at YouTube's ads. Or, now the bloggers or the vloggers, they do content marketing with Sephora. The makeup girls, I respect their hustle a lot too. They have their own makeup lines. So they found a way to get around. It's called the walled garden problem. The walled garden problem is if you go to iTunes, you're in Apple's world. And they're going to sell you more iTunes, more whatever. And you as the podcaster, creator, artist, you don't get anything out of that. So you want people to go to your site. That's why people use Libsyn or whatever. I'd rather they stay on your website, they press play, and they listen to you and don't even leave the website. But you want to make it easy for people to listen to you, so you have it posted, everywhere. But in a perfect world, you self-host the MP3s. People just play them on your site. They never leave your website. Now, that's not the perfect world, but that's what you want to bring people closer to, is they're spending more time on your website. That's also why they don't convert. I've tried them before. Podcast transcripts. This is one thing, too, about the internet. You learn a lot. There's a reason people don't do things a certain way. And 5 years ago, when I had a pretty big podcast, I transcribed the podcast. I thought, what an amazing value. People are going to love it. No. Just no conversion rate, which is whatever. You can't argue with the market. Me, I'm thinking, this is incredible. You'll read no, they don't. They want to listen to a podcast or they want to read a blog. They don't want to read a transcript of a podcast. Fine, lesson learned. But the broader point, though, is that you do want show notes. So if you do a podcast, episode 1, top 5 books. So if you mention 5 books, links to the books, links to Amazon or links to everywhere, because that gives people more reason to go to your website. Or you'll say, bonus episode we're not releasing on any other network or any other channel. Come to the website and get it. Or join the email list and get on the email list and you get the podcast. Any number of things. So I
like that. Yeah. Well, and Rush Limbaugh does that. He has his stack of stuff that he's been doing for 20 years where, he talks about different news articles throughout his 3-hour broadcast. And if you go and subscribe to his on his website, you can get his daily stack of stuff.
That's a great, he's so smart. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason he's the number one, although the golden age of talk radio is kind of gone too, but there was a reason. I think at one point he had like a $250 million contract. This was 10 or so years ago, but that's
right.
Smart.
Yeah, amazing what he accomplished and how he monetized that. I mean, I remember years ago he was doing ties and all kinds of stuff that was kind of an offshoot of the show. But anyway, well, this anatomy of the podcast is interesting, and this is an interesting. I actually turned into an episode, so I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I had a big podcast years ago. And before podcasting was big, I was doing really good numbers. And then I migrated into another realm, probably to my detriment, but I've lived an interesting life, so whatever. And then podcasts really took off. And so it was weird. I was the first one kind of on the wave. And I could have been riding the wave to these huge, huge podcasts people have. And now I'm kind of starting over in a way. Not really, because I still have residual listeners and residual viewers and everything. But
well, I think, in this podcast, I'll tell you, in the short amount of time that we've been doing it, I'm not a guy that gets all kinds of emails, from random people, but I've gotten, 4 or 5 emails, 2 of them, by the way, from high school 18-year-old guys who stumbled across our podcast and listened to it and gave it rave reviews. So, it is really cool to get out there and kind of share some knowledge and talk about this stuff, because I think there's definitely a need in the marketplace, and there's really not a lot of guys doing it. And the growth of podcasting over, the next 4 or 5 years is supposed to triple from what it is now. So, whether or not we're in, the silver age or whatever we're in of podcasting, I do think it's a big deal, although it does seem like a lot of people are recording their podcasts now and also putting them on YouTube, which we're doing. But I was on, as a guest, I was on a huge real estate podcast, I think the second largest in Apple, real estate podcast called Wholesaling Inc. I was a guest this past week, and they don't record their podcast as far as video goes. They only do an audio version currently. But I do know that like Joe Rogan and a lot of these bigger podcasts are doing both YouTube and the audio component, which we're doing and which, our production guy is handling for us.
Yeah, and the reason Joe does it that way is if you do a video podcast, you just strip the MP3 and you upload it to your whatever, to your RSS feed, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Sam Harris doesn't do video. I would say most big podcasters don't video and then strip it off. Most of them, even Entrepreneur on Fire, he was kind of becoming a big deal as I was leaving the podcasting world. He was audio. He might do video now. I haven't followed along, but the reason is audio is easier, but it'll become more interactive actually. Because I always think about what is new, and podcasting isn't going to go away because people, you work, you want to listen to stuff. You're doing the dishes, you're doing laundry. You always want to. It's the ultimate multitasker, right? I'm driving. I don't want to listen to music. I want to listen to podcasts. We're good to go. But the future is going to be much more interactive. And even like Twitter's or Periscope is a little late to the game, but the call-in shows, stuff like call-in shows aren't going anywhere. There's always going to be a need for that. The issue is podcasting is going to grow, but it's going to be harder for newcomers to differentiate themselves from everyone else. That's going to be
I think that's a big issue because last thing I read, there was 5,500 podcasts or something in iTunes currently, which is just, and I don't even know if that number is right, but whether or not it's right or wrong, there's a lot of podcasts out there. And most of them get 130 listens or something like that per episode.
It's just like there's been an explosion on ebooks. It's never been an easier time to be an author, but standing out and reaching people is the biggest challenge. And it's something, even if you're established like I am, it's still something that you just think about is where are you reaching people? And that's why people, fortunately for me, I've never had to buy a Facebook ad to promote my stuff, but I'm going to learn all that stuff.
I think maybe we'll try that out on this Mindset Squared thing once we get this rolling. We'll try a few ads and see how they do with your $25 pinprick method.
Yeah, exactly. 25.
Right.
Get a lot of clicks. And the beauty of it, too, is if you do an ad and it's doing well, you can just say, I'm going to increase it. And you use the same ad, same demographic. And if it's still getting click-throughs, you just keep increasing that. That's
right.
In your newsfeed, you tend to see the ads over and over. You'll see the same Lewis Howell ad over and over. Or I don't know if you still do, but back in the day, he would spend a ton on ads. Well, there's a reason you saw that one over and over again. It isn't because he didn't have any other ads. It's because they tried them all. That one and there is always just sometimes you don't know why things hit. But if it's hitting and keep converting where every dollar you're spending is going to get you $1.10 in sales, then you just keep scaling it until it doesn't work, and then you cut it off, and then you do something else. So I'll
tell you there's somebody out there who must have found that works, because ever since I liked a couple of these Facebook groups about podcasting, I just wanted to learn a little bit about it. All of a sudden now I'm getting all these ads in my newsfeed about tripods, and there's somebody out there that has one called Smooth or something where the podcast actually has a motor in it and it moves with the camera as you move. And all these things now are popping up, and it's like every time I get on Facebook, they're hitting me with that ad.
Yeah, yeah. They found it relative to your interest group. And
Right.
again, we like to think we're all special, but I like Japanese whiskey. You like whiskey, but but similar demographic though. So,
well, you haven't tried my
I was fascinated.
my Pappy Van Winkle here yet,
Yeah.
which I'm going to bring with me. I think next time I come down to OC and for a visit, and we'll stack up your Japanese whiskey against mine.
Right.
It'll be a World War II battle.
So demographically, you would say, well, if you like whiskey, they probably like cigars, right? So you would say, okay, they like this podcast, they like whiskey, they like cigars, okay. Cigar cutters, well, that's kind of a one-off thing, but I'm sure people who like cigars are into, other things demographically. And that's really all advertising is about doing, is targeting what you're into, correlating what you're into based on the rest of you. Because correlation might not equal causation, but correlation does mean correlation. And if cigar smokers also like fountain pens, then you will sell them a fountain pen. Even though smoking a cigar doesn't cause you to like fountain pens, there's a correlation, or at least I imagine there is, between Mont Blanc, fountain pens, or Rolexes and cigars, or something like that.
Yeah, and fine whiskey, all that stuff kind of rolls into one big basket. If you like the DuPont Registry, car magazine or their online portal, then inevitably you start getting all the fine wine ads as well. So there must be some correlation the advertisers have figured out between exotic and luxury cars and fine wine.
Well, even when I was younger, when I was in college, I read National Geographic, and you would see Range Rover as a National Geographics. But if you read Maxim magazine, you saw Axe body or Axe body spray or whatever. Just two different markets. If the content you're interested in is going to dictate.
I don't know why the Axe body spray makes me laugh, but it does. But well, I hear what you're saying.
And that's one of those very humbling moments in my life where I thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And yeah, they're laughing all the way to God knows how much money they made. That was huge for a while. I don't know if it's still.
It was.
Yeah, it was massive. And
are you telling me your wife doesn't let you wear the Axe body spray any longer?
I don't think I even wore it when I was in my most douchiest phase of my life. I don't think I ever would have worn that. I wore.
Okay.
Yeah, I think mine was Aqua du Jour by Armani. I think was the one I used. It was more of a.
Ooh.
But even then, I remember like you'd read GQ. So if you read GQ, they would figure, okay, so you're probably 24 to 34, and so I love marketing and advertising only because it shows like the commonality, the correlation. So if you're reading GQ, you're not going to probably wear Axe body spray. You're going to want something a little more upscale. Or if you're listening to a podcast like this, well, I don't know yet because we'd have to see who listens. But if you listen to a podcast like this, well, what kind of books are people going to want to read, or what kind of subjects are? You don't really know, but you figure that out as you go.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very true. Very true with all those things. And now they're not as much magazines, but they're online, and but there is a lot of ad correlation between liking this and liking that, and then all of a sudden you're seeing ads from all these different things, and it is kind of interesting to see that. I will just jumping backwards real quick because I just wanted to say this to folks that are out there listening to this. The old school marketing methods, though, do still work. I mean, we do a ton of that in the real estate side of the business. I'm a big guy and big believer in direct mail, and I still do, direct mail for a couple of my businesses. People still open up direct mail. They still look at postcards, and there is a place for that. So it's not everything is digital. There is a place for some of that old school marketing, and in some ways, I think it might cut through even better today than maybe it did 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, people poop out, right? Everybody wants the latest thing, and there are still people who long form. I mean, in terms of selling, nothing sells more than content. Nothing sells more than the good old fashioned long form sales letter that solves a problem. And then you tweak it based on what you learn, but fundamentally it's, hey, here's an article. I'm going to give you a bunch of useful information for free. And then here's something you can buy at the very end for the soft sell. For the hard sell, it's, you have this problem. Here's a very specific solution. And then I identify the problem, give you some solutions, and then tell you why this problem. That stuff really, you can read a Dan Kennedy book, and he's a cranky kind of old man, but the concepts still hold on. Like, you have to have an ask. You have to have a call to action. You have to write it a certain way. You have to look at the benefits of the product, not the features. So, for example, with a car, you say all-wheel drive, right? You hear that, all-wheel drive. What does all-wheel drive mean, right? Nobody knows what all-wheel drive means. You say that if you drive and you have to swerve across the road, the tires are going to stick to the road more, so you're not going to flip over. You're not going to lose control. That's the benefit of all-wheel drive. So there's, even once you really know deep into marketing, you know that telling you would not do a commercial talking about all-wheel drive, or you would visually show what it does and how it kicks in or something like that. But you want to demonstrate the benefit of the whatever it is, and instead of focusing on the features. But most product people, they just talk about the features. So if I were selling people on a cigar night, I would say, oh, come out, you get a cigar, right? That's a feature. Premium Honduran rolled cigar, hold it a certain way. You're selling an experience, right? You're selling the benefit of, and even, that as a real estate guy, right? Oh, you can talk about the paint and everything, but fundamentally you're talking about a person building a life.
Correct. Yeah, and you're absolutely doing that with, the Cigar Vent is a great, analogy for that. Is you're describing how that event is going to help you or impact your life, not necessarily the whiskey that's there, but more of the relationships that are formed there, and that spirit or that feeling that you have of being part of that event. And that's goes back to my whiskey talk event that I do here in Napa Valley. We don't talk about the great whiskey that we have and the food and things like that. We're selling the experience of being able to come to that and network with 40 other like multi-millionaire real estate guys that have been doing this for a long time and have made a lot of money, and the relationships and the connections you could forge there. The food's great. The whiskey's great, but that's not what we're selling.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, this has been awesome, Mike. There is some serious value for anybody looking to do a podcast, just kind of running through this whole anatomy of how this stuff, how we've started to put this together. I think I think a lot of people will find that fascinating, and seeing how you take somebody like yourself who, you've sold all kinds of products. You've done a blog. You've done the online thing. I'm sure you've done some old school marketing, and you kind of combine all that. And then you look at, how we brought on like a production guy to handle this for us, and how he puts the production together. There's a lot to it. But it's got to be very interesting for somebody who is just starting a podcast to kind of see the backside of how this stuff's put together and how we talk about it.
Yeah, man, always a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, great talking to you, and until next time.
See you then.